Let me call a meeting to order. We're a couple of minutes after start time, and we have a good group. I would welcome everyone to the Great Salt Lake Advisory Council meeting. We do have a quorum, and the first item on our agenda would be to approve the agenda. I'd entertain a motion.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Tom.
I'm representing Tooele County today.
Okay, great.
And Don, I would like to say that Jesse Stewart is representing Tom Ward today.
Okay, Tom had told me he wouldn't make it and you would send an alternate. So Jesse, nice to have you with us.
Yep.
So we do have a quorum. We have an agenda that was sent out 1 week ago. I hope you all received that. I'd entertain a motion to approve the agenda.
So moved.
Thank you, Jeff. Is there a second?
Tom Triple, second.
Thank you, Tom. Any debate or discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay? Any abstentions? It's unanimous. We also received the meeting notes of our last meeting of September 9, 2020, and I'd entertain, we received no corrections or revisions to those from members, so I'll entertain a motion to approve the meeting notes. You raised your hand, Jesse. Was that a motion?
No, I wasn't at the last meeting, so I don't want to. I didn't realize I raised my hand, but I wasn't at the meeting, so I don't want to make the motion.
Joe raised his hand though.
Allison Gibson dropped by. I'll step away.
We have a motion.
Don, this is Jeff. I'll make that motion.
Thank you, Jeff. Appreciate that. Is there a second?
I second.
Thank you. Any debate or discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay? Any abstentions? All right. The next item on our agenda is to have some committee reports. We have 3 of them, all by Laura. The first one will be a report on the Suny Advisory Committee, which has met since our last meeting. Laura, do you want to give a brief report?
Sure. The Salinity Advisory Committee met on October 7th. They are finalizing several different documents. The first one is the Salinity Research and Monitoring Framework, and it will contain preliminary priorities and recommendations for salinity monitoring moving forward. They've also have a draft salinity thresholds document, and that's a review of literature and data that is being used to describe the critical salinity ranges that are going into their decision making on determining those ranges. And perhaps the coolest thing that they're producing is a salinity matrix, which is similar to the matrix in the 2013 CMP, but it has the salinity parts per thousand on the y-axis and the resources on the x-axis, and just looks at how each resource does with the different salinity ranges. It also has the salinity ranges for the different bays, and so I'm really excited to have this document at my fingertips moving forward. So the Salinity Advisory Committee is wrapping up these documents, and I believe they're meeting again in January to finalize them, and then after that they'll be meeting about 2 times per year, just to kind of continue on with the recommendations and the monitoring. So that's the update on the Salinity Advisory Committee. Maybe if Jeff has anything to add, he can when his HCR 10 turn pops up. But the Great Salt Lake Tech Team, as I mentioned at the last.
Were there Laura, any questions or comments about the Salinity Advisory Committee or what they're doing?
Yeah, good thought. And Jeff, if you have anything else to add, feel free. Okay.
All right, the next report is the Salt Lake. Oh, Jeff, did you have a comment?
No, I didn't. Sorry.
Okay, thank you. The next report would be on the Great Salt Lake Technical Team meeting. As you know, the technical team is the technical advisor to the Great Salt Lake Advisory Council. And they have met recently, and we'll ask Laura to give us just a brief report on that meeting.
Yeah, they met last on September 8th. I believe at the last meeting I presented some details about Greg Carling's isotopic dust footprint footprints along the Wasatch Front. So that report will be up on our website soon, and I can provide you with that information if you'd like. Jeff Denblecker also presented on the progress on the Salinity Advisory Committee in a little more detail to that group. The Great Salt Lake Tech Team's next meeting will be on December 8th. And during that meeting, we'll have Karin Kettering and Keith Hambrick present on some pretty remarkable progress on Phragmites revegetation efforts along the shores of the Great Salt Lake, primarily focused in some of the waterfowl management areas. And then Ashley Kozowski from the Great Salt Lake Ecosystem Program and Janice Gardner are going to present on a wetlands needs report that they've been creating after talking with a bunch of wetland managers around the lake, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, TNC, and of course DWR folks. So those are two of the presentations at the next tech team meeting, which I said will be on December 8th. Any questions on the Great Salt Lake technical team?
Thank you, Laura.
Okay.
Encourage you all to attend on the 8th. Okay, the next report is on PR communications. As you know, last year we funded some assistance helping us do a better job, frankly, of getting our reports off the dusty shelf and in front of people's eyes. We also had some media training for Laura, and we've had a fair amount of activity recently, and I'll ask Laura to report on that.
Yes. So working with R&R partners, they have helped us finalize an education and communication strategy for the near future for the a lot of the Great Salt Lake work we've been doing. As you recall, prior to our last meeting, we had the 12 water strategies report. The 12 water strategies report completed by Clyde Snow and Jacobs. That was released. We did a press release on August 26th. And we did get from R&R a bit of a summary on how wide-reaching that article or that press release was. So I'll just share with you a little bit of the details of that. We had 39 outlets cover that 12 water strategies report. That includes newspaper, online, and television coverage. And the publicity value, something I've never heard of before, but they tell me that the publicity value of the coverage is $104,000. So that's it on the water strategies report. I guess one more follow-up from that is, discussions at other meetings, the water task force meeting, and so on. So conversations are continuing about the water strategies report, and we're looking forward to talking more about that with folks.
Laura?
Yes.
This is Dina Blaze. I have a question about the strategy, the overall strategy. I know that much of it was built around the issuance of the report, but is the strategy, I don't have it in front of me and I apologize, also including sort of maybe an editorial calendar to sort of help keep these issues in the forefront, even after the report is issued? I don't know if R&R has helped to identify opportunities where we can bring, keep the information in front of people in different ways, and not just rely on the issuance of a report to do that.
Yeah, that's sure. That's a good question. In the communication strategies report R&R put together, it did kind of lay out a seasonal timeline of when we could possibly release Great Salt Lake related information. Talking about the importance of lake effect snow during certain times of year, or talking about, spring runoff and how that's impacting Great Salt Lake. So they did kind of lay out different prompts for us to release information and not just rely on reports. So that's something that we're going to be refining and continuing to work out with them, but definitely something that I hadn't thought of before. So
yeah,
new to
but those opportunities to refer back to the report and keep it in people's minds that's great. So I'll look forward to looking at that more closely and working on that with you. Thank you.
Yeah, and if any of the council members would like a copy of the education and communication strategy, I could provide you with that.
I'd love to get it, Laura, if you can share it. Thank you.
Okay.
I have a question. This
Yep.
is Lynn. What do you mean by the publicity value? I don't know what that means.
Actually, I can speak to that.
Okay.
Go for it, Dan.
It's what the council would have to spend in order to get that kind of coverage. It was we received that coverage through what we call earned media, which we didn't have to pay for. But if we were trying to get that kind of coverage and exposure without earned media, if we had to purchase ads or run PSAs or run ads, we would be having to spend about that $140,000 to get the same coverage and exposure that we got through the earned media, which is huge. That's a big number and an excellent job to have 39 media outlets pick it up. We would have had to pay for spots on 39 of those, of those 39 media outlets. It would have cost us a lot of money.
Right. Thank you for that explanation.
Yes, thank you. Anything else on the 12 water strategies report? All right, moving on then to the next PR endeavor. That's the conservation impact study that was just released, that was created by Bowen and Collins. As you know, I sent you guys the copy of the press release. It went out on October 22nd. We had less for that document, or that report. It was less than a month after the release of the 12 water strategies report. Perhaps that was one of the reasons why the coverage was less. But we did get an op-ed in the Salt Lake Tribune, authored by Leland. So thanks to Leland for that. And I can get you a copy of that if you all would like to read that. And then on Monday, in the front page of the Deseret News was a great article, front and center, on the report, on the conservation report. So that was, a while after the press release, but still definitely got the word out there right before a presidential election and during a pandemic. So that was pretty impressive to have that sort of coverage. And I can put the link to that. I haven't shared the article with you all, but I can put that in the chat box when I'm done, and you can go check that out. Read the comments only if you dare. And I did get word today from the PR firm that the Cache Valley Daily also did an article on the conservation study. So I think that's great news to get some coverage up there. And in comparison to the water strategies report, the coverage for this, like I said, was a little less. There were 6 stories total and a publicity value of $13,000. So that's all I have on the 2 reports.
Laura, this is Dave. Could you share all the articles and the op-ed?
Yes.
Great.
Thank you, Laura. It's been really effective to have the support of Laura's training and getting this out there. It keeps coming back around. Not long after the publication of the articles about the strategies, I was contacted by Scott Anderson, president of Zions Bank, and asked a presentation about the council and the number of our reports to their advisory board, which consists of about 40 individuals who are business leaders along the Wasatch Front. And I did that last week, and I think it was quite well received. A lot of questions, a lot of interest, and a lot of people surprised at what's going on so close to them that they're not aware of regarding Great Salt Lake.
That's terrific.
Any questions or comments about the PR communications activity report? Thanks, Laura. Appreciate all your good effort. Okay, the next item on the agenda is the Great Salt Lake Resolution Steering Group report. As you know, in 2019, the council initiated an effort that resulted in enactment of House Concurrent Resolution number 10. That resolution included, from line 67, it resolved that the legislature and governor encourage the departments of natural resources and environmental quality through their relevant divisions to expeditiously, jointly, and collaboratively engage with a wide range of stakeholders to develop communications for policy and other solutions to ensure adequate water flows to Great Salt Lake and its wetlands. It was determined that a steering committee should be established to conduct that, and the steering committee and the state requested funding And we are currently funding the facilitator for this effort, Jeff Denlaker. The effort's nearing an end, and we asked Jeff if he would give us a report and an update. So, Jeff, I see you've already loaded your slides. The floor is yours.
All right. Thanks, Don. Yeah, been a great opportunity to work with an amazing group of people over this last year. They've invested a significant amount of time, had some great discussion, great candid conversations, really wrestling with some significant challenges and trying to find some recommendations for how we can really try to get more water to Great Salt Lake and its wetlands. And so what I'm going to walk through today is the steering group has not formally approved their report yet, but this is kind of my take and kind of highlights of what the group has been discussing. The objective, as Don read from the resolution, really comes down to the legislature asking the Departments of Natural Resources and Environmental Quality to identify a group, and I'll show you the names of the folks who've been involved here, and just on the next slide here, but really to try to engage with these experts, both in water law, in water law with Great Salt Lake issues and water management throughout the watershed, to try to identify recommendations, policy and other solutions that can ensure water flows to Great Salt Lake and its wetlands. And I think if you haven't had a chance to review House Concurrent Resolution 10 from 2019, please do. There's a lot of great information there. It really kind of covers the history, the basis for why we need to wrestle with these challenges. So the group, the names here, there's 20 official members of the steering group, but then most of them also have alternates as well. And it's been amazing to me, how all of these folks not only came to a monthly meeting with the steering group, but also in between those monthly meetings, there were numerous other meetings, informal, two-person conversations, but also small groups who came together to talk through the issues and to really try to find some actionable recommendations. And so you can see here it's highly qualified individuals representing state agencies, municipalities, representing experts in water law, conservation groups, agriculture, a wide-ranging group here. And I think the key thread through all of them is just they all brought expertise and understanding of the challenges that we're facing with Great Salt Lake. So they get a big kudos for all the effort that they put in this year. We started the group started in January of 2020, and let's see, there we go. And one of the first things that they did was really to try to all kind of get back up to speed on the most current research analyses that groups have been doing, a lot of it being funded by the advisory council, and identifying some key guiding principles that they wanted to have help guide the discussions. From there, they went through a number of different brainstorming exercises to identify key challenges, identify needs, opportunities. I think it was important that none of the ideas were rejected. They all, were noted. They were all part of the discussions. But then as we moved forward with everything on the table, we were able to then try to refine those into some actionable recommendations. As part of that process, we broke the steering group, self-selected into 4 different groups that you can see here on the slide. One focused on legal matters, one focused on agriculture, one on municipal planning, and one on integrated planning. And certainly there's overlap between those different groups, but and folks served on multiple of these working groups. But I think those discussions that those individual groups had, you know, that time that they had was really able to focus and really wrestle with specific challenges, and, you know, to come up with specific opportunities and recommendations. So as you can see, it's really kind of a they all talked amongst themselves, and we kind of kept going back and forth to make sure that the language in the report is right. And so you know, and just, I guess, talking about the guiding principles, I think that's important here, because this is really kind of the foundation of the discussions that they had. But they, number one was to engage the public and decision makers. This is needed so that they can better appreciate the value of the lake, the steps that are needed to preserve it, and what they can do. So we need to bring everybody into the conversation. Number two is really to promote flexibility. We want to find new incentives that optimize water use and sustain the lake. Number three is to better integrate water use into land use and economic development decisions. So we want to connect those processes. Number four, encourage research to ensure that we can answer critical questions. 5, explore how existing laws and regulations can be used to protect water supplies for the Great Salt Lake. We certainly don't want to reinvent the wheel. We want to make sure, I mean, we've got a great legal framework in the state that extends, you know, back to the foundation of the state. And so we don't want, you know, I think that was a key point of agreement. We don't want to reinvent that. But we want to make sure we understand what we have now and see where we can better use that, utilize the law, and then identify areas where we might be able to make some tweaks to improve or to adjust to the challenges that we have today. And number 6 is to find ways to adapt existing laws, you know, to achieve the goals. And then lastly, you find thoughtful ways to sustain the efforts. And you know, as we collect more data, as we do more analyses, as we improve our management of our existing systems and administrative processes, those do take time. And so we need to make sure that our agencies, the folks who are really going to have to implement this, have the staffing and the funding that they need so that it can be done well. Those guidelines were then kind of fashioned into 6 different focus areas that you see here on the screen. A key goal that we had as a group was that we wanted to identify recommendations that can make a difference. You know, how can we move the needle? You know, not keep treading water, but how can we improve the situation? And so these 6 different focus areas, I'll walk through those here in a second, but we wanted to make sure that you know, I guess these focus areas include specific recommendations. As you can see, the last bullet there's 16 opportunities and actually 60 specific recommendations that they've identified. But we wanted to make the point that these are not exclusive or inclusive. These are recommendations that were identified by the steering group. They all vary in scope and complexity, and they are all important. But certainly other ideas could be brought into the mix as well as we move forward together. But really, they all together provide a balanced approach to engage the community. We want to build upon existing law and policy, and we want to make sure we're using science as the foundation. So just walking through the different focus areas. The first one was educate and engage. And you know, and I mentioned we had 16 different opportunities. In this focus area, we have 2. One is to find ways to help the public and decision makers connect with Great Salt Lake. And I want you to just, that word connect, I think, is a common theme through all of these. Is we're trying to connect processes, we're trying to connect people, we're trying to connect the watershed to be able to address the challenges that we have here today. We can't do this in any one sector and do this alone. So through that process, we need to understand what we're doing and why we're doing it. And so that's the thrust of number one, that first opportunity. The second one is to create a Great Salt Lake framework that improves coordination among excuse me, governmental entities and other stakeholders. Here, we really want to focus on communicating, coordinating, and I think most importantly, collaborating. How can we all work together to address these challenges? The next focus area is to improve information and decision making. The number 3 here is to better measure our water resources in cost-effective ways to optimize their use. We really need better data if we want to manage better. And so that's what number 3 is going to be focused on. Number 4 is that agency and other decision makers should account for impacts to Great Salt Lake when they're planning and making decisions that can impact the lake. So, we need to better understand what the benefits are from the decisions we make, but also the consequences. We need to make informed decisions, and to do that, we really need to work together across agency boundaries, across basin boundaries, to be able to make those better decisions. Number 5 is develop an integrated strategy to navigate longstanding legal and policy issues. Here, again, it's about connection. How can we integrate across our legal, our policy strategies across basins, where we have a common objective, where we're incorporating Great Salt Lake, the consequences to downstream water users in these decisions. And then number 6 is to close data gaps in baseline condition of water flow to Great Salt Lake and its wetlands. We needed a first do no harm approach. We need good science to make good decisions. And so this opportunity includes a number of recommendations, specific studies, including helping define depletions throughout the basins better, looking at reuse, looking at groundwater, looking at how we can incorporate water quality trading into our decisions, or incorporate Great Salt Lake into our water quality decisions that we have. The next, as we go kind of around the wheel there, the next one is to optimize agricultural water use. The key objective here is that we want to preserve and protect agriculture. And to do that, there are a number of programs that are already are working to do that. And so number 7 is to really try to leverage existing programs that optimize the use of water in ways that can benefit agriculture and Great Salt Lake. And so there's a number of federal agencies, state programs that provide funding to producers to be able to manage their water better. And so what the thought is here is that, rather than creating new programs, let's see if we can help these existing programs connect, so that there's a common objective here to preserve agriculture and Great Salt Lake. And then number 8 is, where possible, to maintain and conserve working agricultural lands that are linked to the Great Salt Lake ecosystem. And so here is, we see that agriculture is an important part of our culture, part of our economy. And so we need to look at ways where we can preserve agriculture in ways that we can also link them to Great Salt Lake. The next focus area is really looking at more on the municipal side. How can we optimize M&I water use and land use water planning? Number 9 is to find ways to use less water on lawns and gardens. So how can we use less water outside, whether that's through secondary metering, reducing our turf, better irrigation practices? Are there ways we can incentivize through financial means for folks to use less water outside? Number 10 is to ensure that water planning informs our land use decisions. So how can we connect our planning efforts? There's a lot of agencies whose focus is to make sure that we grow in a wise way. But what we want to do is we want to make sure, as we look at our land planning, as we look at economic development in our communities, how can we make sure that water is part of that discussion, or part of those equations that go into those planning efforts. And then number 11 is to fully understand how land use changes affect water for Great Salt Lake, and then how can we manage those changes better. benefit the lake. And really what this comes down to is really making better informed decisions. So understanding how land use changes affect our depletions, the amount of water that we're using, and in the end, how much water ends up making it out to Great Salt Lake. The next focus area is to refine legal and policy options. So number 12 is really kind of the fundamental component of this focus area, and that's to really look at how can we protect water supplies for Great Salt Lake using our existing legal authorities. We don't want to make any wholesale or significant changes to our legal framework, but what we want to do is we want to identify, well, where could we better utilize it, and so we may already have many of the tools that we need, but what we need to do is look at that and identify where we can do that. Number 13 is to fully explore the idea of depletion-based models to promote the optimal use of water. We want to provide producers more flexibility, incentives to reduce their depletion. But we have to also make sure we fully understand the benefits and consequences of those decisions, and so we want to make sure that we're incentivizing producers to make decisions that make sense for them, but then also be able to use that opportunity to be able to benefit water, or increase flows to Great Salt Lake as well. Number 14 is to fully explore how principles of prior appropriation can incentivize efforts to decrease current depletion levels while protecting existing rights. And again, here I think the key words here are protecting existing water rights. But how can we incentivize those water rights holders to deplete less? And where could we make it so that it makes sense to them to use less water, to deplete less water, and send that water downstream? And then number 15 is to explore new statutory authorities that incentivize optimal use of water resources and allow those water rights to be used to support Great Salt Lake. So here is really kind of coming full circle. Is after we go through the analysis in number 12 is to then say, well, are there any new tools that are needed? Some of the ideas might include shepherding, or we have in-stream flow statutes. How can those be used, better used, to provide flow downstream to Great Salt Lake? Are there ways that we can increase the number of parties who could acquire water rights that could be used for Great Salt Lake? So there's a number of thoughts there, and the idea here is to really go through a thoughtful process, engaging stakeholders to try to explore some of these concepts. And then the last opportunity and last focus area here is really how do we, and it's last but it's not least, perhaps you can make an argument that it might be even the most important one here, is how can we sustain these efforts over time? We don't want it to be just a flash in the pan, something we do here in response to low water levels that we have right now, but how can we sustain these efforts over time? And so we want to identify innovative and sustainable funding sources to ensure these water supplies for the lake. And so how can we make sure that the agencies, the different groups who are doing the work, how can we make sure that they have the staffing that they need to be able to do a good job, to do a great job doing this, and make sure that they have the financial resources needed to do this, whether it's for additional staff, for studies, for to acquire water rights. We need to have this conversation of, well, where can we find funding to do all of this? And so I think lastly, I guess trying to wrap this up. I know I've gone through this very quickly, but I think some of the key conclusions that I extract from this, and these are certainly a work in progress, but is recognizing that Great Salt Lake is really a centerpiece of our water legacy. We've been given an amazing water legacy by the pioneers who developed this area through previous generations who've preserved the water that we've needed to grow for our agriculture, for our urban growth that we've seen. But what we're looking at here is we also need to recognize that Great Salt Lake is part of that. It's part of that hydrologic cycle that we want to make sure we preserve and we for future generations. And then, we want to make sure we recognize that it's a significant challenge to overcome, and it's not a zero-sum game. We don't have to take one from another. I think there's a lot of opportunities to connect our people, our communities, how we use water, how we make our decisions, so that we can benefit everyone. And I guess that's what we're really hoping to be able to find and be able to accomplish here. And really what that's going to take is collaboration. We're going to have to, certainly a technical element to this, but I think perhaps more importantly is that we need to really collaborate as a community. We need to be, use our collective ingenuity and our determination to really be able to solve a challenge like this, because it's not just about one part of the lake. It's not just about one drainage basin. It's really looking at this collectively. How can we solve this problem or these challenges? And the steering group really feels that the recommendations represent a common ground. I don't know that there's anything necessarily new, but I think what they've really done is collectively, got their arms around a whole lot of ideas and really filtered them down and really focused them into some specifics for the community to consider. And I think the intent here is that it really becomes a catalyst for discussion, that they can be studied so we can make informed decisions and then eventually take some action. And and it's not something that we can kick down the road. It's really something that we need to start now. We're seeing low lake levels, and we can't predict necessarily what's going to happen next year or 5 or 10 years down. With a whole lot of accuracy, we can forecast looking at different scenarios. But what we do know is that decisions that we make now will have an effect 10, 20, 30 years down the road. And so with that, I just wanted to open up for questions. I'm not sure where I am on time.
You're good, Jeff. We've got time for some discussion and questions, so go ahead.
So Jeff, Dave Livermore, thank you for not only your great presentation, is really well done, but also all your work on facilitating the group. And thanks to all the members of the steering committee who worked so hard on this. Question is, do you see, and perhaps others would answer this, maybe Fox, these focus areas and recommendations becoming legislation or more suggestions to the legislature? Normally when you have HCR, the continuing resolutions, they have become kind of a foundation for further action. Anyway, that's one question. Another question maybe for the group is, are there certain key strategies or focus areas that are of such importance that GSLAC itself could consider taking them on as a participant to move and advance the recommendations?
Now, Representative Hawks, you want to speak to the legislative component? I guess my initial thought is that, certainly, I think as we wrestle with, with these challenges and we discuss the different opportunities and specific recommendations, I think, there very well may, at the end, need to be some legislation that comes out. But I think, I don't think I can say with certainty that there will be. I think the intent is that we really begin this discussion, and then perhaps that is a track that we end up going down. Tim, anything to add?
Yeah, I could just say briefly, I don't think there's prescriptions in here for explicit recommendations on policy. I think there's some general directions. So, you know, as Jeff said, I think some of these conversations may eventually lead to policy, probably not immediately. One of the big recommendations is kind of about existing authorities and how do we, you know, make decisions in a more informed way. And if there's, Dave, you asked about, you know, is there anything big or new? I think one thing this dives into that hasn't really been explored that much is the intersection between water and land use planning, and just getting a handle on that, because right now those decisions are kind of made in a vacuum independently. How do we make sure that they fit together and that impacts the Great Salt Lake are considered in a variety of venues? So that's maybe that's a roundabout answer, but that's kind of my sense.
Yeah, the land use implications are huge, and the suggestion is important. Of course, it dials back to the early days when we envisioned GSLAC and looked at other models like the Chesapeake Bay Commission, Puget Sound Commission, others that had not just recommendation authorities, but actually some, I won't say regulatory, but at least the consultation with those entities was important. Also, the Tahoe Regional Planning Agency at Lake Tahoe. So it seems like these are fantastic recommendations. This is, and also, Tim, hats off to you for getting this through legislature. Question is what to do with this information, if we should form subcommittees to advance some of these ideas.
This is Marcel. Could I just add something to that conversation?
Yeah.
You know, Dave, to your question about what maybe GSLAC could take forward that may be an outcome of this report and recommendations, I do think that there are a number of studies and I'll call them studies and actions that are recommended, some of which are, you know, very intensive hydrologic studies that are going to require a number of agencies and modeling capabilities, that kind of thing. But there are other components that are really the kinds of studies and reports that GSLAC has funded so far. And I think there's opportunities within a broad list of components, even with the land use and integrating water planning and land planning. There are a number of recommendations around you know, toolkits or even case studies where cities or municipalities or counties are actually doing things well, for example, and can provide a path for other jurisdictions. So I just think that there's probably some opportunities in there to look at once it kind of gets, once the report gets out and more details are available.
Thank you, Marcel. Responses? I had a question, Jeff, in regards to the recommendations. I appreciate your presentation and your facilitation, and I know it's a big challenge, people with a lot of different ideas and agendas. What I hear you listing in the 16 items are general principles. And what I read in the legislation is the charge to develop recommendations for policy and other solutions. And I suppose general principles is the first step towards that, but I'm wondering, was there any discussion about more specific policies or more specific recommendations, such as making conservation a beneficial use or changing water law to facilitate shepherding? Were those discussed, and are there more specific recommendations coming?
Yes, there definitely are. There are, my latest count is there's 60 specific recommendations. So those are studies, those are, recommendations on additional coordination, education. there's probably something there for everybody. There's a lot of specifics there, and you know, in the report, we're working through finalizing it now. We're close. You know, I'm hoping here within the next month or two that the document will be the report will be finalized. But then hopefully it will become a useful document that can help you know, guide formation of additional groups to, you know, for further discussion, consideration. But really, you know, this will provide, I hope, will be a useful list of you know, actionable recommendations that different groups and hopefully as a community, you know, as a watershed, can be considered, you know, for further development and eventual implementation.
Will those 60 more specific recommendations come forward with the support of the steering committee and the department heads involved?
I think certainly from the steering group, and then, you know, the steering group is providing the recommendations to the departments and then to the legislature. So I think, you know, the departments have certainly been involved with the steering group, but I would characterize these as recommendations of the steering group.
Okay, great. Other questions or comments?
I have a question just about the timing of those recommendations rolling out. Is this something that will occur in an interim committee meeting, or is it a report back to the legislature during the session? Can you help me understand kind of the time frame for that?
Yeah, the steering group will certainly be providing an update here this month to the Water Development Commission and to the National Resources Subcommittees. I think then but the report, I don't, you know, we might be able to finish it this month. I think more likely the report will be finished in December, you know, and then made available. I don't know if anybody else has a better forecast of how that would work with the legislature. But.
Hey, Jeff.
Oh,
Jeff, just really quick, do you want to talk about the scheduled times that we do have to get the word out to the different groups? Do you have that available?
I know, I don't have the specific dates here right in front of me. I know we're going to be providing a presentation to the Bear River Commission this month, the Executive Water Task Force, the Legislative Water Development Commission, and then there's an interim committee as well, subcommittee. I think those are the 4 presentations outside of this advisory council that'll be happening this month.
Thanks, Jeff.
Other questions or comments? Jeff, thank you for that presentation and for your good work in this effort.
Yeah, thanks. Well, I think really the kudos go to the steering group. They've done the lion's share of the work and discussion here.
Okay, thank you. Next item on our agenda is public comment period. As you know, we always allow at our meetings, we set aside up to 10 minutes for public comment. I'd like to know if we have anyone on line here who's interested in making a comment, so I know how to allocate the time. Please state your name if you are.
Hey, Don, this is Jamie Butler. I would love to make a comment.
Okay, Jamie, anyone else? Okay, Jamie, go ahead.
Bonnie and I are just starting our Salty Science series, where we're talking in 6 webinar format events over the next few months. We're going to be talking about all of the chapters from the Great Salt Lake biology book that was just published. The first one is on November 12th at 6 p.m. We are going to record these, so if you can't come, they'll be available after on our YouTube channel. And you can go to greatsaltlakeinstitute.org and see the schedule of all of those 6 different events that are really, like, we're really talking about the future of Great Salt Lake. That was our intent with this book.
I think it's gslinstitute.org, right?
No, Great Salt Lake Institute.
Oh,
sorry, Great Salt Lake Institute.org. Yeah, sorry. I'll send it in the chat.
Great. Thank you, Jamie. Any questions of Jamie about that? Thank you very much. Anyone else have a comment to make before I close the public comment period? Okay, we'll close the public comment period, go to the next item on the agenda. As you know, in recent years, the Advisory Council has secured some limited funding, both directly from the legislature and through a diversion of this portion of the brine shrimp royalty. And that funding has allowed us to accomplish many of our reports, the assessment of drying lakes around the world, the assessment of costs of a drying Great Salt Lake, the look forward at lake elevation through the GSLIM analysis, the Bear River, or excuse me, the conservation impact study that was reported on at our last meeting, the public relations assistance we received, the USGS nutrient study we participated in, and a number of these we've leveraged our money with other sources. So for the current fiscal year, which ends in June of 2021, we have $88,000 that's unallocated. And Leland chairs our subcommittee to make recommendations on how to utilize that money. And Leland, I'll call on you to give your latest recommendations.
Sure. Laura, do we have that Word document that you can display, or do you want me to try?
I can throw it up there.
You want to do that? That'd be great. So what we did is review through all of the recommendations that were associated with the studies. And we took those that were identified as high priority, and we then tried to, I would assume, guesstimate how much it would cost us to do that. We came up with the prioritization from the studies of the 3 that are being talked about. Do we have those up now?
Getting there.
Getting there. So,
how about now? Oh.
There we go. So this shows the amount of the that was being facilitated, the amount that's being carried over remaining after the facilitator cost of the $88,000. There are 3 studies if you want to scroll down to those. The first study is continuing on with the work on conservation. We want to, the existing conservation study looked at those water entities that are part of the Bear River project. What we would like to do is continue on and try and look at all the other water users, major water users that are inside the drainage area and provide that same level of information. As an example, we looked at Jordan Valley Water Conservancy District to look at what kind of conservation would be necessary there, but we didn't look at either Utah County, Central Utah Water Conservancy District, or Metropolitan Water District of Salt Lake as 2 other ones. We didn't look at what kind of conservation would be necessary in Salt Lake City, Orem, or Provo, and they're all major water users inside the drainage area. So what we want to do is extend that to the remaining areas, both in Salt Lake and Utah County. We're hoping to be able to get some level of partnership with the with those entities, both the large water districts as well as possibly any of the municipalities that are involved. And then we're proposing that we would put in $30,000. We're hoping to partner with those entities, and hopefully they would put in $20,000 to get us what we estimate the total of the project to be around $50,000. Second study, we've been questioned a number of times on impacts of water reuse. This is wastewater that's treated to a level where it can be reused either on lawn or garden, or heaven forbid, the direct potable reuse, which is happening in some locations. We anticipate that this is going to cost about $30,000 to $50,000. We're proposing $30,000 of funds from the Great Salt Lake Advisory Council. We have a commitment of $20,000 from the Wasatch Front Water Quality Council to give us the total proposed budget of $50,000. Finally, the third project is to look at something to do with the salinity or nutrient studies that are being continued. We haven't completely defined that yet because we're working with the Salinity Advisory Group on what they would need. And we're also checking with the Great Salt Lake Ecosystem Project about what possibly we need to do on nutrients to continue the development of those areas. So we've left $28,000 unallocated that we can utilize for that. Obviously, if the other projects above 1 or 2 cost more than what we're proposing, and we feel that they're necessary to be completed, we can shift some of that funding up there. Those are the 3 areas that we have prioritized for the studies. Are there any questions or recommendations, changes that people would like to see? Anybody want to throw in a lot more money and we can do more?
Any questions or comments?
Leland, this is Candace from Water Resources. I know Erica Gaddis and I have talked about potentially doing some collaborative reuse studies. So there's potential that we could, however we could contribute, I think we should talk more about it with Water Resources. And I don't want to speak for Erica, but I know I've had conversations with the water quality as well. So
we would love to collaborate on the scope of work. We do have allocated the 50,000. If we think it's going to take more than that, it's then we would be able to look at trying to get you to help put more money in.
Okay.
Nonetheless, we're going to proceed with this, and we're going to proceed post haste so we can get it completed before the end of the budget year, because we need to have it spent by then. So, if you would, if you're interested, I can give you a call. I think I have your phone number. I'm pretty sure I do. But who knows on this world of life? So we can give you a call and we can coordinate a meeting together to meet virtually, of course, and talk about that.
sounds great.
Thank you, Candace. Any other comments? Any other suggestions, recommendations?
Specific question on process. Are these studies that require RFPs and a long process, or can you do sole source, or how do we handle these types of grants now?
How do we handle which?
Laura, why don't you handle that one?
Yeah, so I always need to go back and double check the thresholds, but with these smaller projects under 100,000, we can do just a sole source, or I'm sorry, like
it's a professional
bidding process, a professional services agreement. Yeah. So.
But we would, if we do it off of like the approved vendor list type approach, we can then look and talk to a couple of them and just from their proposals pick the one we think is best without having to go do an exhaustive search for someone who can do it.
That's correct.
If we know someone who's good at any one of these subjects, let me know and let Laura know, and we can talk about including them in the analysis.
Great, thanks.
Thank you, Dave. Other questions or comments? Criticisms? Okay, I'll entertain a motion to approve the recommended projects for the current fiscal year. You so making that motion, Leland?
I would make that motion, yes.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Dave. Any debate or discussion? All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed, nay? Any abstentions? Let me note one thing. Thank you, Leland, for your work there. Going forward, we'd like to get a little bit of a head start on the next year. If there's anyone who would like to participate in this process with us, we would welcome your involvement within limits. We have, at the last meeting, asked for people to forward any recommendations or suggestions, and we've received several that we'll be considering going forward. So just let me know if you'd like to spend some time helping us sort through these research and project study priorities. Okay, next on the agenda is the meetings to ask whether there are other items for discussion among the council issues, priorities, actions, follow-ups, future meeting topics. Anyone have any comment there? Suggestions? A lot of the presentations we have at our meeting are tied to our projects and our studies, but we've also had some excellent ones that have been recommended by members, so don't be shy. Okay, hearing none, I'll go to the next. Yeah.
Don, sorry, I'm talking too much here, but as you learned yesterday, we do have a new governor. I'd suggest that if you have the time, your delegation of GSLAC can arrange a meeting with the governor, our new governor, sometime, just to get these issues before him.
I think that's an excellent idea. We'll mark that down as a priority. And we'll put your name down as someone who could participate in that as our esteemed vice chair.
Okay.
So, Mr. Chairman, I also have a question about whether or not there's any follow-up opportunity from the meeting you had with Scott Anderson and his colleagues that we may want to consider in the future.
I did have a couple of them ask me to follow up with them and contact them about possible opportunities to make additional presentations. So I am doing that. And I think that will likely happen. That group was about 40 individuals with fairly broad coverage along the front. So yeah, I do expect there to be some follow-up. Other questions or comments?
Don, just a comment. We're seeing the lowest lake level since 2016 in the North Arm. So just if you don't track it on a daily basis like I do, just an FYI, lake's getting pretty low.
Thanks for that good news, Joe. Lake level, I think, continues to be a significant focus for our group, and I appreciate you sharing that note. Other comments, suggestions, recommendations? Let's go to the next item, proposed 2021 meeting schedule. We have, since for many years, been meeting on the second Wednesday at 10 a.m. every other month, January through November. And so we've gone through and plugged in those dates, put them on your agenda. I do note that the May 12 date conflicts potentially, Lynn, with your issues forum. Now, last time that happened, we didn't hold our May meeting, or we scheduled around it. Is that still your intention, Lynn? Maybe we've lost Lynn. We'll leave that.
So I am keeping my ear to the ground as far as public health, confidence, and creating the kind of experience that the Issues Forum has always trademarked. So I'd like to hold to those dates, and I will have a better feel for the actual event happening on those dates sometime after the first of the year.
Hey, the advisory council, should we hold to the 12th, or should we move our date right now, knowing the potential conflict?
I suggest.
Didn't hear you. Were you on mute?
This is Tripp. I'd suggest moving it.
Hey, let us check calendars, then in our January meeting, we'll look at an alternate date. And any other conflicts with those listed dates? Hearing none, Any other business? Our next meeting then will be January 13th at 10 a.m. I'd entertain now a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Second.
Thank you. Any debate or discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay. Any abstentions? That's unanimous. Thank you, everyone, for participating. Appreciate it very much.
Thanks, Don.
Thank you.
Thanks all.